We moved into the house on Hawthorne Street in late October, just as the leaves began to fall and the nights grew colder. It was an old Victorian-style home with crooked steps, creaky floors, and a strange, musty smell no amount of candles could chase away. But the rent was dirt cheap, and after Mark's layoff, cheap was all we could afford. Our son, Jamie, was 6. A quiet, artistic kid who loved dinosaurs and had an imaginary friend named Mr. Blue he spoke to when he thought no one was listening. I assumed it was just a phase. All kids go through it, right? The first night in the house, Jamie refused to sleep in his room. "It's too dark," he said, clinging to my leg. "There's something under the bed." Mark rolled his eyes. "It's a new house, kiddo. You're just not used to it yet. There's nothing there." He checked under the bed. Nothing but a few stray dust bunnies. Still, Jamie wouldn't settle down until I let him sleep with the hallway light on and the door cracked open. I told myself it would pass in a few days. It didn't. By the end of the week, Jamie was waking up every night, always at the same time, 3:03 a.m. Sometimes he cried, sometimes he just sat in bed staring blankly at the doorway. When I asked him what was wrong, he'd whisper, "It's back, the shadow. It crawls out from under the bed and talks to me." I felt a cold weight in my chest every time he said, "That Mark tried tough love." "You're 6 years old, Jamie. Big boys don't make up ghost stories to scare their mums." Jamie didn't respond. He just looked at me, eyes wide and glassy. That night, he drew a picture with his crayons. A jagged, pitch-black figure with no face, crouched beneath a bed. He didn't name it. He just wrote in shaky letters, "It whispers at night." I kept the drawing. The next night, I decided to stay up and check on him myself. At 2:55 a.m., I sat quietly outside his room in the hallway listening. At 3:03, the silence inside turned dense, and then, faintly, I heard something. Not Jamie's voice, not anything human, a wet, dragging whisper, like someone speaking through waterlogged lungs. It lasted no more than 10 seconds. I burst through the door, heart pounding. Jamie was asleep, but he was curled into a tight ball, his blanket clenched. In both fists, eyes squeezed shut. "Jamie," I whispered, brushing his hair. He didn't wake, he just murmured one word in his sleep. "Closer." The next morning, I asked him what the voice said. He looked up from his cereal. "It says the same thing every time. It tells me not to scream. And then it says it wants me to come under the bed. Just for a little while." That day, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Jamie's words clung to my mind like cobwebs. It wants me to come under the bed. What kind of child says that? What kind of shadow whispers, "Don't scream"? I searched for rational answers. Maybe it was sleep paralysis or night terrors. Maybe his imaginary friend had taken a darker turn. Still, something deep in my bones told me it wasn't just his imagination. Something was wrong with that room. I placed a baby monitor under his bed that night. Mark laughed when he saw me doing it. "You know what this looks like, right?" "I don't care what it looks like," I snapped. Something is waking him up every night. And it's not a dream. At 3:03 a.m., I was already awake. I stared at the baby monitor screen, the green LED flickering with the faint sound of Jamie's breathing. For a few seconds, all was still. Then, static, crackling. Then, something else, a voice, wet and gurgling, impossible to describe in human terms. It came in low, almost like it was right up against the microphone. Not yet. Almost ready. My blood froze. I rushed to Jamie's room. He was awake this time, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. He didn't even flinch when I opened the door. "What did it say to you?" I asked. He blinked, slowly. "It said it's getting closer, that it'll be ready on Friday night." That was 3 nights away. The next day, I begged Mark to let Jamie sleep in our room. He refused. "I'm not letting our kid rule the house with ghost stories. It's all in his head, Laura. He'll grow out of it if you stop feeding it." But I knew what I'd heard, so I set up an old camcorder in Jamie's room that night, pointing straight at the bed. I pressed record at 8:30, kissed him goodnight, and closed the door, leaving it slightly ajar like he liked. I didn't sleep. At 4 a.m., I retrieved the camera, and what I saw nearly made me vomit. At 3:02, the footage was still. Then, at exactly 3:03, the bed skirt rippled. Not from wind, not from movement above, from underneath. Then slowly, a hand slid out. It was black, long-fingered, with joints that bent the wrong way. It pressed against the floor like a spider finding footing. Then a second hand followed. Something pulled itself out from beneath the bed, not crawling, stretching, unfolding. It was tall, taller than Jamie, despite coming from under a bed, barely a foot off the ground. Its head scraped the ceiling. Its body twitched unnaturally, like each movement cost it great effort. And then it bent over Jamie. It didn't touch him, it just leaned in, whispered. Jamie didn't move. The figure retracted slowly, melting backward under the bed like smoke in reverse. The timestamp read 3:05. That morning, I packed Jamie's things. I didn't care what Mark said. I was taking him out of that house. But when I opened his door at 7:30 a.m., he was gone. The bed was perfectly made. The baby monitor was silent. On the wall, written in black crayon, were 4 words that hadn't been there the night before. He came with me. I stood in Jamie's empty room, trembling. The bed was untouched.
No signs of struggle, no footprints, no broken windows, no open doors, just those 4 words on the wall. "He came with me," I screamed for Mark. He rushed in, saw the empty bed, saw the writing. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. "Where is he?" I
could barely speak. "It took him," I whispered. Mark looked at me like I was insane. He checked the whole house, the backyard, even the street. Nothing. No sign of Jamie, like he had simply vanished. The police were called, flyers were printed, neighbors questioned, but every answer came back empty.
I knew they were wasting time. Jamie wasn't out there. He was still here, just not on our side anymore. That night, I refused to leave Jamie's room. I sat on the floor beside the bed with the camcorder in my lap, replaying the footage again. And again, that creature, it was real. It had taken my son. Mark begged me to sleep, to come to bed. I ignored him.
I waited, and at exactly 3:03 a.m., the baby monitor, still on the nightstand, crackled back to life, but Jamie was gone. So what was breathing into the mic? I turned toward the bed, slowly. The sheets shifted. Something was under there. I crawled toward the edge, forcing myself to look. Just darkness. Then a whisper. "You left the door open, Mummy."
I yanked back, heart pounding. It was Jamie's voice. "Jamie," I whispered, "it's cold down here." Tears filled my eyes. "Where are you? What is this place?" He brought me under the bed. It's a hallway, dark. I can't see the
And I didn't know whether I was hearing his voice through the monitor or through my own mind. He said I could come back if you take my place. I froze. He only wants someone who believes. I did believe, and I was ready. I lay flat on the floor, heart hammering, and slowly inched toward the bed frame. The darkness beneath was unnatural. It swallowed the flashlight beam whole.
Not a shadow, a doorway. I reached in with one arm. The cold hit instantly, like submerging into ice water. I felt floorboards, then nothing. My arm just kept going, further than it should have, then fingers wrapped around mine. Tiny, familiar. Jamie, I gasped. You're almost here, Mommy. I pushed my head under, and I fell. I wasn't in Jamie's room anymore. The hallway was narrow, the walls pulsing like living tissue.
The air smelled of rust and rot. My screams were muffled by a low, droning hum, as if the space itself was vibrating. There was no light, yet I could see. See the rows of beds lined along the endless walls, each with a child sleeping soundlessly, their faces pale. Some looked like they hadn't aged in decades, and at the far end, I saw Jamie. He stood beside a figure, tall, crawling with shadow.
No face, just holes where a face should be. Mommy, Jamie whispered, eyes glassy. You came. I'm taking you home, I said. The creature turned. It opened its arms, not to stop me, but to welcome me. One for one, it rasped. Jamie
took a step forward, and suddenly the floor beneath me cracked. Hands, hundreds of them, reached from the walls, trying to pull me deeper. I screamed and yanked Jamie into my arms. We ran, but the hallway had no end. It was 1981 when we found the photograph. It arrived in a plain envelope, no return address. My mother was sorting the mail when she saw it, slipped between a bank notice and a coupon flyer. Inside was a single photo, a man in his 30s, standing in front of a low stucco building with a faded green awning. His eyes were sharp, haunted. He wore a suit 2 sizes too big, and a small gold ring glinted on his right hand. Lewis's ring. The note on the back read only, Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Elil boys, A90132 or 35. We stared at that message for hours. My father refused to put the photo down. He studied every crease of the man's face, comparing it to old childhood portraits, the shape of the jaw, the eyes, the ears. It's him, he said finally. He's alive. I wanted to believe him. The FBI refused to open a new investigation. They called it a hoax. Grief creates patterns, the agent told us. Sometimes people see what they want to see, but we weren't done searching. That year, my older brother, John, traveled to Houston, then down to a tiny border town in New Mexico. He followed a rumor from a retired private eye, one who claimed a former mob courier had mentioned 2 missing Italian boys in a drunk confession. John found the building from the photograph. It was a shuttered barbershop now, with yellowed windows and dead flies on the sill. A woman across the street said it had been closed since '72, but she remembered the man, kept to himself, she said. Real polite. Spoke like he wasn't from around here. One day he was just gone. She mentioned one strange detail. He was always looking over his shoulder, always asking about bus schedules, always changing his route home, like someone was chasing him. When John asked her if he ever gave a name, she nodded slowly. He said, his name was Louis, she whispered, but he made me promise never to tell. Back in Fayetteville, my father made a decision. He rebuilt the billboard. The original one had fallen to rot and wind, but this new one was bigger, bolder, 20 feet tall with floodlights that stayed on all night. On it were the faces of all 5 missing children, age progressed as best we could, and beneath them, stolen, not lost. We will never stop looking. That week, a black car drove by our house. No plates, tinted windows. It circled 3 times. My father stood in the yard, shotgun in hand, until it finally sped away. The next morning, someone left a dead dog on our porch. No note, no prints, just the same cigarette brand we'd found in that Oklahoma motel ashtray, crushed beneath the body. I started to have dreams after that. Not dreams, memories, maybe, of a tall man with a southern drawl, of a dark basement, of whispered
orders. I'd wake up shaking, the scent of smoke and salt water in my nose. Were they memories from before the fire? Or something my mind had created, twisting decades of pain into phantoms?
One night I visited the ruins. The house was long gone, replaced by weeds and vines and broken stones. But I walked the old path, the place where my siblings' bedroom had been. I lit a single match and stared into the black. Then I saw it, carved deep into the old oak next to the rubble. Alive. Forgive me. The bark was new, maybe 2 years old. Fresh enough to bleed sap. I took a photo and showed my mother. She cried for hours. We weren't chasing ghosts anymore. Someone out there wanted us to stop. But someone else, maybe Louis, maybe one of the others, was still trying to be found. We were closer than ever, and someone was getting nervous. It was a stormy night in early 1985 when the final clue came, a letter. No envelope, just a folded sheet of parchment taped to the front door. It was soaked, but the ink hadn't run. Whoever wrote it had planned for the weather. It said, "Stop digging, some graves are meant to stay hidden. Last warning, no signature, no return address, just the faint trace of cigar smoke clinging to the page." My father read it and didn't say a word. He just walked to the shed, got his crowbar, and pried up the last section of our basement floor, the one part we'd never touched since the fire. The concrete there had always been strangely newer, poured after the flames were gone. The fire chief had dismissed it as post-tragedy repairs, but my father never trusted that explanation. Beneath the slab, we found bones. Human bones, small ones. At first, we thought our worst fears had come true, that our siblings had never been taken, just buried in secret beneath our feet. But the coroner's report changed everything. The bones weren't all from the same person, and they didn't match the dental records of any of the 5 missing Sodder children. Some were older than the fire, some were newer. Someone had been using our house as a grave long before, and possibly long after, December 24th, 1945. We turned everything over to the authorities. The FBI took control, launched a new investigation, even brought in forensic artists. But 3 months in, the report was sealed. No cause of death, no names, no answers. When my father demanded updates, a federal agent visited us late at night. He was alone, wore a grey suit and no badge. He said only, "You're looking at something much bigger than a fire. For your family's safety, let it go." Then he left, and we never saw him again. Weeks later, we received one last letter. It was postmarked from Palermo, Sicily. Inside was another photograph, an elderly woman standing next to a young man who looked almost like Louis. They were in front
of a vineyard.
The woman's eyes were wide with fear, as if the camera wasn't supposed to see her. On the back, one line, "The circle ends when the fire is forgotten." My father passed away that winter. My mother followed 2 years later. We never found Louis, or Jenny, or Martha, or Maurice, or Betty. But I'm still looking. The billboard still stands. And sometimes, when I visit late at night, I find small things left behind. A child's shoe, a toy soldier, a matchbox with a gold ring inside. They never come with notes. Just silent reminders that someone out there knows the truth. Some say it was the mafia. Others say it was a government program gone wrong, children taken for testing or rehomed through underground networks. A few even believe something supernatural happened that night in 1945, but I know this: 5 children vanished. No bodies were ever found, and someone, somewhere, never wanted them to be found again. The fire never burned hot enough to erase the truth, just enough to silence it.